All right. All right, let's try that again. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Welcome to the session. Thanks for coming in. Now, let me see. All right, Facebook's working. Okay, so let's flip that on. So we are streaming live to Facebook. Here we are. Thanks for coming in. I've been waiting all week for this session, believe it or not. And I'm excited to get to our topic for this week. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start the session and just dive right in. So I want to say welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session. I'm honored to be with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty, and I look forward to sharing time with you in our sacred space today. So the things we're going to do together in our sacred space is when we start, I will open sacred space, as I have been for the last 8 or 9 sessions. And then we'll talk about our topic for the week. And our topic this week will be the economic crisis. And we'll dive directly into what I call the sacred aspect of money. We have a bunch of Q&A. I may not get to all the Q&A. I may push some to next week. And then this week, instead of a poem, I'm going to tell just a bit of a story, sort of mythic snippet of a story that will be related to our theme. And then we'll have a suggested exercise for the week coming in between this session and the next session. And then we'll close sacred space. Okay. So let's get going. So I'm going to start by setting sacred space. And I'll say that the space we are about to set is a space devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, not from the outside, but from within our own selves, however we tend to take that guidance. It is a safe sanctuary space for us all to relax and surrender with no danger or threat together, so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And as I open sacred space today, I will propose the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. The first is confidentiality, standard Vegas rules, right? What happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. But here, because it's online, the way we will kind of logistically manage that is that the video is public, everything's public, right? So the way we will maintain confidentiality is through anonymization. So when you post a message, or if you don't wish to be anonymous, that's fine. But if you wish to be anonymous, go into your profile settings in Crowdcast and change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter or something. And then as you post, you'll be anonymous. The second principle is no threat or fear or controlling. Which translates into, in this venue, no fixing, no tough love, no recommendations, no telling, here's how you fix that, right? The goal here is to hold space for each other, to be afraid, to be clueless, to be, at a dead end, to be happy, to be anxious, or to be relaxed, or, thrilled with being in lockdown and actually being okay with that. And then maybe feeling guilty and then being okay with that too. That's what this space is for. Out in the profanum, we can give each other book recommendations, and it's like, oh yeah, my sister went through that. Let me tell you what she did. What you should do is this, kick the deadbeat out, right? That's all fine in the profanum. There's nothing wrong with that. But here in sacred space, the physics of space are different. We're here to partake of a specific kind of nourishment together, so that it's amplified and intensified. And it's a kind of nourishment we just can't get anywhere else. So when we're here, we're like, okay, let's just focus on this. So that's the second. No threat, controlling, no fixing, no tough love. The third is a corollary, no commerce. Because there's no fear or threat, nothing may be sold or recommended or even suggested. We are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. In other words, we're here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. Okay, you are here bringing the fruit of yourself, right, as an end in and of yourself, not as a means to another end. And then the fourth is another corollary. There's no expectation of participation. When you're in sacred space, there's no pressure to do anything. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. So you can come and go as you please. You can chat or not chat. You can ask a question, not ask a question. You can leave halfway through. You can never reach. I mean, sometimes people leave and they, kind of just say, "Oh, sorry, Artie, I'm leaving." That's very kind and polite of you. You don't have to do that. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to do that, right? I'm not the teacher sort of taking roll call. You just come and go as you please. And that's the beauty of held sacred space in a group. When all of us are together, if even like half of us leave and come and go, we're on our phones distracted, the other half are still holding space for each other and for them. Right? There's no obligation. You're coming in, and if you need to be like all hot and bothered and then leave and come back, you can do that. We hold space for you. So that's the beauty of a space like this. And what we've been finding in the past 2 months is that it tends to work pretty well online as well. So all of us here together amplify that. Okay, so all of this is what I'm proposing that we open now. And the last safety check is if you are not okay with what I just described, we're going to give you a moment now to just withdraw from the group. And no big deal. There's no fear, threat, or control that you have to stay, right? And you withdraw from the group, and we'll catch up with you later out in the profanum, right? By the goat herder, we'll have a latte, we'll have a smoothie together. So no worries, right? So just come and go as you please. So we'll give you a minute to decide, make sure you're comfortable. Okay. All right. And now for the rest of us, we will now move forward together into our held sacred space. So I hereby open sacred space, and I ask us all to follow the principles of confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no expectation of participation. All right, so here we are, back in sacred space again. Thank you for joining me. I'm thrilled. And so the topic I want to talk about today is economic crisis and the sacred aspect of money. Okay, so the way this works, I'll just kind of lay it out here. So in my mind, with the pandemic, there are two tsunami waves kind of rolling across the earth and human society. The first wave is the actual virus, the pandemic, the health threat, the threat to physical safety and danger. And we have been addressing all of these aspects of the pandemic when we've been talking about fear of death and the power of grief when confronting loss. And even the topic of honoring the dead, our loved ones who have passed in our previous sessions. So that's the first wave rolling through. And now the second wave is the wave that is right on the heels of the first wave, which is the economic devastation that is rolling across nations and all of the economic distress of people in economic distress, financial distress, uncertainty, where they have lost, right? Have tremendous financial losses, not just loss of loved ones or threat to their physical health. And they have grief over losses, financial losses, the shutdown of businesses. And these are, generational family businesses, not just sort of corporate entities, or even just the straight loss of property, financial losses in the stock market, product inventory you can't sell anymore, crops, livestock, cattle you have to slaughter because the supply chain is disrupted. And then also the loss of community, right? Family restaurants that close, employee groups from companies that are dispersed, a cohesive, nourishing social group that you are part of that is now dispersed. So this current financial distress, right? This current financial distress, the grief over losses, and then also anxiety and fear of the future, right? It's unclear what is ahead of us economically. So with this second economic tsunami wave, we can't address all of this at once in one little session like this, right? But a couple things to say. The first is that in the face of loss, right, all that I have said on the power of grief to transform this pain from previous sessions applies to financial and economic loss as well. social loss, loss of relationships. Right? And the idea is that the power of grief to transforms the pain and the loss, if you stop running away from it, into something else. We call it, in one of the archetypes or metaphors, an ancestor, right? That will eventually be nourishing and guiding for you in your life, but also your descendants in the future, people who are, your biological descendants, but also the people you mentor and teach and influence. All of that applies to financial and economic loss as well. Economic loss, business loss. And as an entrepreneur, having started, directly 2 companies and indirectly, dozens more, I feel this, like when you're a startup in the Valley, your startup is your baby. It is like this sort of expression and extension of yourself. So I choose my words carefully when I say this. Economic loss, business loss is also analogous to the death of a kind of kin or comrade, where if it is not properly grieved, then that loss will not transform into an ancestor. Will guide you and your descendants, not just kids, but future versions of your own self in this life. If you do not grieve your losses as a separate step, and that's fine if you're not ready to take your time, right? But ungrieved, they will not transform into the ancestors that will protect and guide you going forward. So that's the first thing to say. And the second that I want to spend a little bit more time on is this idea of, I want to cover another aspect of the economic tsunami that is typically thought of as being specific to that realm, the economic financial realm. And that is our relationship to money. Money in and of itself, as its own phenomenon, and as a life force of its own in the world. And in talking about money, I'm going to do this kind of kung fu move, chess move, right? Where generally what I like to do is I like to take a thing, a phenomenon. It could be money, it could be anything that is typically thought of as being only in the profane. And then we take, in this case, money, we bring it into the precinct of the sacred. And then we regard the thing itself in the sacred, i.e., without the lens of fear, threat, and control. For many of us, money is synonymous with fear, threat, and control. So how do you even look at it without it? Well, that's why we do it, to strip away fear, threat, and control and see what's left over. Right? Simply look at it as a thing in and of itself, with no fear, threat, or control, no shaming, no judgment, no sort of or else, right? And the thing is, you can do this with anything or any life force, really, because the nature of anything will tend to change when you move it back and forth across the limit between the sacred and the profane. Like a goat, that we always use the reference of the poor goat, right, is different in the sacred and the profane. 2 people together as a couple will be different when they're in the profane versus when they're in the sacred and they're getting married and they're performing and receiving sacrament, right? And even a baby being bathed in the profane is one thing, but a baby being bathed in the sacred is a completely different archetypal thing, right? Where in Christianity, we have the sacrament of baptism, right? And that comes up as well. And so when you move the thing back and forth between the realms, there will be things that change about it, but then there will also be things that do not change. And when you notice both the things that change and the things that do not change, you end up learning something about the essence of, or the pattern of the thing itself, of the you might say the archetype itself, right? The fancy word, as you learn more and more about the nature of the sacred and profane, is archetype. So here we will be looking at the archetype of money, the core essence or pattern of the phenomenon of money itself. And so money itself, money is a life force. In dreams, it is typically a symbol of a person's ego power, right? Your ability to make things happen, to manifest and express and enforce your will and manifest your will by harnessing and directing the ego power of other people in human society. As a for instance, with money, I can swipe my credit card online, and within a week, right, within a few days, all the stuff will start showing up at my door, right? Or I'll check the reviews of like contractors. I'll swipe my credit card, and within a week, right, my kitchen will be repainted, right, without me lifting a finger, all through the ego power of my money. A new car will show up in my driveway, et cetera, et cetera. Food will show up. And so money is a life force. Money is an avatar, an extension of your ego power. And so in the profane, when you are haggling over the price of the goat, you are haggling over an exchange of ego power, right? And then when you move the goat into the temple, into the sacrum, when you surrender your goat over for sacrifice to the temple staff as a sacrifice and donation, you are similarly sacrificing and surrendering a portion of your ego power, right? But in some sense, in a kind of divine, sacred, not transaction, but a hopeful exchange for a closer bond to the sacred, right? It's not a purchase, right? You're giving the goat to like deepen your relationship, and hopefully you will have this congress between the two of you. Just like when you go on a date, right? When you bring chocolate and flowers, it's hopefully not a payment, right? It's a sort of deepening of the relationship, and other things may happen. And so you hope for divine counsel and guidance. So money is thought of here as an avatar of your pure, distillated ego power. And in this age of human history, it is basically one and the same with ego power, because we are in an economic kind of era of human history. In the past, military might, being a general, being a sergeant in the army, gave you more ego power than just money, or being a cleric, right? The power to run inquisitions and sort of have anyone burned at the stake gave you tremendous power, much more power than just having money. But here in this age, it's money. It's money. So money, also, to use the vocabulary of 7-day healing, just to plug in for those of you who study with me, money is a board member. Money is a board member, fully valid, card-carrying board member. All the exercises you do with board members, you can do with money. Okay. Now, it is a life force because, well, first of all, you die without it, right? It is literally a currency, a medium by which you harness the power of the collective, village of humanity around the world, around you, to make things happen, to bring you food, to build buildings, to even build temples of the sacred. In our current world especially, you cannot live without the use of money. Even Thoreau at Walden, right, the classic example, he only lasted 2 years. And after the 2 years, he came out, wrote his book on Walden, beautiful, beautiful treatise. And when he wrote the book, he sent it to his publisher, and it was sold in bookshops up to this day for money. And that is okay. Okay. So money is a life force. And the way you regard money as a life force, you can take the same lens, this life force lens, and regard any other life force in the life of our world. A list of other life forces would be a partial list. Sex. The power of sex, the power of physical attractiveness, power itself, celebrity, charm, intelligence, talent, physicality, brute force, brute strength, right? All of these are powerful life forces. And money itself is a life force as well. Money here in this example, money builds everything, right? Money builds the internet on which we are able to connect. Money builds the airplanes we fly in. It enables the growing of food, the distribution and transport of the food we eat, of the clothes we wear, of everything in our profane world, but also in our sacred world. Money builds the temple, right? The temple in Greek is called the Temenos, which means, temen means to cut, right? Which means the cut off place. So when you're in Manhattan and you have cut off, right, on the Upper East Side, the real estate for St. Patrick's Cathedral, that takes ego power. Everyone wants that piece of land, right? And so it takes ego power to cut it off from the rest of the world and maintain the boundary, right? It's valuable real estate, and to keep people out, and also to build up the iconography of the marble, the gold, the wooden pews, the statues, the stained glass. All of that takes money. The artisans don't work for free, right? The priests and temple staff of, even in St. Patrick's Cathedral, are humans. They need to eat food, they need to have shelter, they need to have healthcare, and they need internet and bank accounts too, and all of that. And that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So in a very special way, money itself is a extraordinary, powerful, and profound hidden bridge between the realms of the sacred and profane, a nuanced, subtle, and complex bridge. And as its own life force, right? Let's take this even one step further. Money, as a life force, also has its own golden thread that will weave and braid on its own, and then in the precinct of your life will weave and braid in your life, and ideally into the larger golden thread in your life of your bliss and your tzaran, and the sort of flow and direction of the ideal kind of purpose of your life. So then money has a place in the realm of the profane and the realm of the sacred, and also in the realm and pathway of your bliss as well. Now, when I lay it out like this, right, I mean, it's kind of obvious when I say it, but we often fear to say it, and we often deny it. And when we do healing work around money, and the healing work that I do, it is often to heal the very fact that we are two-faced in our approach to money. Money is just money. It's just kind of doing what it's doing. We're the ones that are two-faced about money, right? We use it and exploit it in the dark of late night, and then in the morning we deny its validity, and we're like, oh, I don't know, I don't use money. Money's not important in life, even though, you know, when nobody's looking, you use it to its full sort of pleasure and potential. And that, in a word, is just, I mean, that's not cool, right? How would you feel if somebody did that to you? And so when we heal our connection to money, we are reconciling this two-faced behavior on our part, right? Toward this sort of life force of money. And we say things like money is the root of all evil and all this stuff. Money is just a life force. It's just there. It's an impartial force of life, like any other, like a river, like an ocean. And when we look in healing at reconciling our two-facedness, what we look to is to figure out, you know, what is the wound that causes to be so, right? And you know, it's sort of family ideas about money, how we were taught about money, cultural sort of two-facedness about money, all gets sort of inherited by us into a kind of wound that forces us to cut off our relationship with money as a lost board member from the healing sort of perspective. And the other side thing to say here is that this wound that's in us that causes us to have this estranged relationship with money is not our fault, right? Because it's a wound, right? And our wounds are not our fault because nobody asks to be wounded. But the question, the healing question is, what is the matter here? What is the wound that causes us to be two-faced or fearful or over-controlling, which then causes all of this drama and disruption of the flow of money in our life? And often it's either the flow is disrupted, so there's not enough money, or the flow is full, but the flow is undirected. It is destructive, right? So I can't tell you the number of families and through personal experience where there's plenty of money sloshing around, but the way it flows is just poisoning and ruining everything. Lives, relationships, integrity, institutions, everything. Right, so the problem of money is not just the problem of not enough. The problem is also too much. When it overflows the banks and like floods the village and everything's destroyed, that's a problem too. So anyway, we're not going to do a full healing with money now in our little sort of Sunday session, but that's the general idea of how we do it, right? And so a corollary here is that money is not intrinsically evil. Right, it is just like any other life force: sex, charm, power, physical force, intelligence. None of these life forces are intrinsically evil. They can be used, any one of them can be used for evil or for good, for attack or defense. But it is not intrinsically evil any more than sex is intrinsically evil or intelligence is intrinsically evil, right? Intelligence like brought us the nuclear bomb, and we still don't consider intelligence to be intrinsically evil. money makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? And everybody loses their minds, right? So there is this this inequality of how we treat the different life forces. And for those of you in healing, any of the life forces I've mentioned are also board members. They can all be sort of interacted with as well. So anyway, ideally, right, a life force, money in particular here, is not viewed just as a necessary evil, right? Like any other life force, it is powerful and dangerous when used improperly, but also immensely pleasurable when used well, right? Money is immensely pleasurable when you use it well and in a healthy and healing manner, just like sex, just like intelligence, right? And by the way, right, all the things I'm saying here, when I say them like this, they seem perfectly obvious, but they aren't the things we usually think about with regard to money. Because when we look at money from the lens of our profane world, right, and we look at it just through the lens of fear, threat, and control, what happens when you look at something through a lens, it is that it looks back at you through the same lens that you're holding, right? So for example, when we look at money through a lens of fear, threat, and control, with a profane lens, this is the face it looks back at us with its profane face, with the face, the face of money that looks like fear, threat, and control. And so when we flip it and we look at it with a sacred lens, which is what I've been trying to sort of paint a picture of, then it tends to look back at us with its sacred face, with the face of love, nurturing, and surrender. Okay. So in a lot of scenarios in the profane world, when coaches or healers or even clergy, right, self-help people, will try to help you clear your money blocks, right? They will try to get you to break through your fear and limiting beliefs. At the end of the day, there are two aspects of a worldview like that, given all the physics I've just described, right, that end up being pretty firmly grounded solidly in the world of the profane. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with those programs or approaches. But when you're doing something like that, when you're going through a process of transformation with a healer or a guide or whatever, a self-help person, even for yourself in a book you're reading, right, you just want to know where you are, right? Navigationally speaking, in life, you always ideally want to be clear with yourself about where you are at all times, especially like when you are in the sacred and when you are in the profane, because the physics of sacred versus profane are completely different. But the powers you have access to in the sacred versus the profane are completely different. The ground rules are different. The path of integrity is different. How you act, what buttons you want to push and not push in either sacred or profane is completely different. That's why I can't sell you anything, right, when we're in sacred space together. I could. You're like very open. You're very suggestible, right? But I cannot do that because the rules of the sacred forbid it. Right? The minute I do that, the sacred space dissipates and we all lose the feast that we're sort of enjoying together. And so being sensitive to which kind of space you're in and acting in accordance with the physics of that space and harmony with the, shall we say, tzuran of that space will then optimize your bliss and golden thread path. Because your bliss and golden thread path wind through the sacred and the profane equally throughout the course of a good life, right? And so knowing what space you're in and then acting accordingly, navigating accordingly, this in many ways, let this train pass here. This in many ways could be thought of as the essence of wisdom and the essence of really how to live a good life. Okay, so then beyond this is to know, right, to actually have the higher vision of when, not just when you are in sacred space or when you are in profane space, but going one step further to know when it's the right time for you to create sacred space and push back profane space, or vice versa, right? To redraw the boundary line between the sacred and the profane and renegotiate the cut line between the sacred and the profane. I always think of that Bible story in the New Testament when Jesus chases out the money changers from the temple, and everyone's like, oh, see, that's why we're all like communists and Well, not the American evangelicals. They're definitely not communists. But this is why we like give away our things, and we like don't like money, and we're afraid of it. And when I read that story, I'm like, that doesn't say anything of the sort, right? Jesus never said money changing was bad, right? He always said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. But in that story, to me, he was saying, yeah, your money changing is fine. I mean, we do need to change our shekels to drachma to like donate to the temple. But you guys, you can't do that in here, in the temple sacred atrium. You have to go back out to the profanum and do that stuff out there. And they're like, no, we paid a bribe and they let us in here. It's more convenient for the richer people coming in, and we do a great business. The profanum's full. And he is like, none of that is relevant. You guys get out. And he came with his gang of apostles and whipped them out. And everyone was like, scandalized because the temple leaders didn't get their bribes anymore, right? So anyway, with the self-help coaches, when they want you to power through your fear and blast through money blocks and regain control of your life, to me, just to help with navigation, we are deeply in the profane aspect of money, and that's okay. But we're in the deeply profane aspect for two reasons. Number one is that there's this implied fear, threat, and control of you'd better do this or else. So you're in the profane, period. Number two is that the approach of curing my money blocks is typically focused on this idea of curing, not healing, right? And we've talked about curing versus healing in the past, so I won't go over it again, which is a specific localized problem with money, like I have tennis elbow. So just cure it, just like fix the damn thing, right? Clear my money block. And typically the thing you're curing is the phenomenon that there isn't enough money, right? And so the idea is to brute force cure this with an affirmation, with brute forcing the spiritual world, better money management tactics, all of which are about trying to tighten your control over money. When you affirm, I want more money, you are trying to control the flow of money. And this is all in the realm of the profane. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But you want to navigationally know where you are when you are thinking about money from that perspective. And so when we approach money then from a healing perspective versus a curing perspective, the idea is different. The idea is instead to approach it as a board member, you could say. You can use another word, as a valid life force of its own. And then to seek reconciliation with money. If it's not flowing the way you want it to, something's not coordinated, right? It's not this dumb cow that you whip and exploit for your own purposes. It is a life force. It has its own intelligence. It knows how to navigate in and out of your golden thread, right? So when a guy is on my team on the soccer field and he's not passing when he's supposed to pass, right? He's not the enemy. He hasn't switched colors and gone to the other team. There's an issue of coordination. So I go talk to him and we reconcile. I was like, what? He's like, no, you're too close to the goal. It's like, okay, I'll slow and then I'll speed up. And he's like, okay, great. And then we figure it out and then we're flowing again. Right? And then money is magically flowing again. So in reconciling with money, just like a teammate, it often involves actually asking money what it wants. Using the methods and techniques we have in healing, but you can use any method. But at a higher level, what we're really doing, regardless of the method, is we are holding space for money. To use our language, we are holding sacred space for money, for the life force of money. So we're releasing control, we're releasing threat and fear in order to try and discern the shape and path of the golden thread from the point of view of money, and then how it runs through your life and dovetails and reinforces and amplifies your golden thread and bliss. That is the healing question. What is going on here? Right? I have too much money, it's ruining everything. I have too little money, it's ruining everything. And the question is not how to like fight my fear and blah, 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 and regain control and master everything, right? It's just, let's just take a break and say, what is even going on here? And there's my teammate who just, in my view, completely overpassed the ball, screwed up. Let me just go take him out for a latte and say, what's going on here? Like, we're not scoring, we're not winning. We're both like going to lose our endorsements at this point. Just tell me, talk. What is going on? And when he talks, I don't interrupt. I don't shame him. And I don't like argue with him. I just listen. And so That's at a high level. Now, here right now, in the urgency of the pandemic crisis, for many people, it is often very, very urgent, this money question. So people don't feel like they even have the time to, like, take a step back and step into the sacred and look at money from this higher perspective, because they're like, dude, I am neck deep in the feeling of fear, threat, and control around money this week, this month. Like, I don't know if I can feed my family this week, right? And the first thing I want to say is that is absolutely valid. And the second thing I want to say is that when you are, and we all are in that state in one place or another in our lives, in one life force or another in our lives, right? If it's not money, if like I never have any problem, maybe you have problem with sex or intelligence or charm or relationships, right? So with some life force at any given point in our lives, we do hit that low point. Okay, we do hit that low point. So it's 1,000,000% valid. I absolutely feel that. And what I want to say is, when someone comes to me, there was a question, I think in the second session, that was exactly this question. And I'll answer it the same way. When you are that deep in the world of fear, threat, and control, I mean, it's small comfort, right? But at a high level, you don't even really have to worry. Because if the cattle prod voltage setting is that high, you don't need to think. Right? There's no procrastinating. There's no navel gazing. Through the pure cattle prod of fear, you are goaded into action, and you will simply react. Right? You don't have food. You don't have money. You will get food. You will get what you need by hook or by crook, by one way or another, humiliating yourself. Like you're breaking your integrity, cheating, stealing, stepping over other people. In other words, your animal instincts will take over. It's the survival instinct embedded deep in the profane, and it's a beautiful instinct. That's why we're even here in the first place. That's why we've survived. Our ancestors have survived. That will be taking over and driving the bus of your life. And it's horrible. Sometimes it's horrifying. It's certainly awful to be the one going through that. But that is a part of life, and there is a time and place for that. Okay, so if that is what you are going through, then this sacred stuff isn't going to help you right now in the moment. Right? But the powerful thing is that at a high level, when you do later, and this too shall pass, right? Everything passes. The good things pass and the bad things pass. The powerful thing at a high level is when you do have a quiet period of time in the middle of this storm, or even after this storm, to be able, only if you want, no fear, control, or threat. If you never go into the sacred, you'll just bump from profane episode to profane episode. And frankly, that's not the end of the world. It's like 90% of the world is doing it like that already. And we can be shamey and say, oh, the world is going to pot or whatever. But it's like, we're 7 billion people. We're higher than we've ever been. And, by many measures, we're doing all right. We're doing all right, right? We could be doing it in a more balanced way. I mean, there is a lens of looking at the world where we're like, we're doing okay. We're doing okay. Okay. And we want to improve even further, but we're doing okay. So if you do want, and I say that just to not shame or threaten you into going into the sacred, right? If you don't want to go into the sacred, I have no use for the sacred, then that's cool. You do what is best for you, because you always retain your sovereignty in your life. But if you want, if you are curious, if you like doing it, during some quiet period of time in your life, when you are able to go into the sacred, to reflect and take guidance from within, maybe just a period of minutes in the middle of like the storm, or even hours, sometimes a whole morning of quiet reflection, sometimes a whole year of quiet reflection. It does happen. It does happen. To then use that sheltered time to go into the sacred, to do the healing around money, so that the near-term urgent emergency life or death curing of money issues will not be so needed over the long term, right? And I will say more about how to do that in a bit in our kind of exercise. But so I'll pause there and say, so with this first part of the talk then, my hope is that I've made a reasonable opening argument for the validity of money as a fully valid life force, as valid as a part of your life as your heart or liver or lungs, not just as a necessary evil to be used and abused and then thrown over the side of the boat When you're in pleasant company, you pretend like you never even knew money. I never met him. I never met him, right? Even though it did help you through all this stuff of your life. Because it really is that level of recognition and acknowledgement of the proper place of the role of money that is, in many ways, this first step to reconciliation and healing our connection and our relationship to money, the sacred aspect of money, which then will become an ancestor and inform and guide the profane aspect of money as well. Because we've said this a million times, right? The sacred always comes first, and then the profane follows from there. The sacred always sets vision, and then the profane follows in line from there. And so for the back half of this talk, I want to give a little bit of, well, some tips and guidance on how to think about what is the appropriate role of money in a person's life, and what are some ways to try and determine that in your own life scenario, on your own later, right? When you kind of do the exercise. It's funny, my own golden thread, right? There's a much deeper program around healing money in all of this way, and we go into all the stuff, right? That I was actually originally going to release around now, right, this year. But when the pandemic, it's given me this moment of pause to say, like, I don't know how appropriate it is to like release this program on money in the middle of all the chaos right now, when everyone's kind of more in panic mode. So that's something I've been sitting with as well. So I've stopped that launch because I'm sitting to listen for the guidance of the money life force as well, right? But at a high level, I can give you some of the guidance here. Okay, so one simple way to think about the most powerful and most naturally congruent role of money in your life is to think in terms of something we talked about a couple sessions ago in the Q&A. I mean, so much good stuff comes out of the Q&A, so I thank you for your questions. And it is this framework, what we talked about, the difference between need and want and desire. Okay, so let's apply that to money. So on the first level, our needs are safety, survival, shelter, food, healthcare. Money definitely has a role with that, and we don't need to belabor that. That's what we live with every day. At the second level, at the level of our wants, are things like prestige, soothing, numbing, comforts, shielding, all the things we talk about in the 7-day program. And as Gowrie described a couple of sessions ago, these are the things where if you don't do them, they hurt emotionally. And the reason they hurt is because these are the things you do to pain management the wounds, right? And when you stop pain management, when you stop hitting the pain management button in the hospital, the painkillers stop, prestige, soothing, numbing, comfort, shielding, and then the pain of the wound flares up again. So you know something is serving as a want when you stop doing it and the pain comes back. All right, that's from Gowrie a couple sessions ago. And then the third level then is at the level of our desire, right? Which is at the level of our vision and bliss and Siren and path of the golden thread and all of that. And at this level, of course, again, as Gowrie described a couple sessions ago, the golden thread is so easily broken, right? The Bill Stafford poem, everything we talked about in sessions 1 and 2. The golden thread is so easily broken with just a shrug from that poem, precisely because when you don't do your bliss, it doesn't hurt. Because your bliss is not a wound. Right? So when you do your bliss, you're not managing the pain of your wound. Your bliss is beyond your wound. In many cases, you can say it grows out of your wound, but ultimately it transcends your wound. It is not in the realm of fear, threat, and control. It grows out of your wound of the profane and then grows in the garden of the sacred, right? In the realm of love, nurturing, and surrender. Right? So when you ignore the sacred and you ignore the golden thread, even though it is a desire, when you don't do it, it doesn't hurt, right? So you don't even notice you've left it and the golden thread breaks. That's why it's gossamer thin. Because when you leave it, it doesn't complain. It doesn't say, hey, come back. And it doesn't cattle prod you. It just breaks and you lose it. That's how you know. That's one of the ways you know that a thing might be your bliss. When you love to do it and you don't do it and it doesn't hurt. And so at this third level of desire in the golden thread, to recognize that money, here also not just at need and want, but here at desire also has a valid and critical role, at least equal to any other valid life force. Sex, intelligence, charm, luck. When you see money at this level too, it is to bring you into deep reconciliation with money, not as a necessary evil, but as a beloved member of the collective family of powers within you, the pantheon of powers within you, and equally as any other, chartered and assigned to assist you in fulfilling the path of your bliss and golden thread in your life, just as much as any other life force. And that is why when you realize this, instead of regarding money as something to be exploited and used in the dark and then disowned in the light of day, right? You're horrified. You treat money now as a valid partner and beloved part of your own true self. You ask money, well, what do you think we should do here? And money will tell you. And the pro tip, so that's the basic. And then the even extra pro tip trick I want to share with you is this. In this constellation framework of needs, wants, desires, the secret trick, and you all know this when I say this, but just to say it, the secret super pro tip trick is that the bliss and golden thread level, the desire level, does depend on the other two. You need to heal your wounds enough to even be able to see up into the sky and not look down at the weeds, right? And you definitely need, you need to eat, you need to live, you need healthcare and all that stuff. So the desire bliss level does depend on the previous two levels, but it builds upon them and then grows beyond them. And then ultimately is the vision that leads them. And when its leadership is established firmly enough, in many cases, it will override them. In other words, when you have a clear vision of your bliss and the pattern that follows, it will tend to become the dominant organizing pattern of your life overall in such a way where the wants level and even the needs level fall in line to support the fulfillment and manifestation of your bliss and the golden thread, period. I don't have enough time to get into specific examples in detail, but the classic example that I'll always throw out is that the Reverend Martin Luther King, just a couple of weeks before he was assassinated, in a speech said openly, "I know I am challenging death." And he continued on with the speech. And that is, like many things of the sublime, both utterly beautiful and utterly terrifying. But to me, that is an example of the need of the level of desire, bliss, and the golden thread, having taken such a leadership role, right, in the avatar of Dr. King, that is the thing that leads, and even leads, and not just leads, but overrides the level of want and even the level of need. And the most core level of need is to survive, is to continue. And it's like, no, we keep going. Even if we are going to be shot, we keep going. Because if we hide and don't fulfill our overall mission, what is the point of being alive in the first place anyway? And that is why that's such a galvanizing example. It's actually used often as an example of, well, I don't want time to talk about all that, but that is an example of the bliss and golden thread level, being so well established in a human that it leads and even overrides the other two levels. And when I say this, I don't say this as the state of affairs that should be so, right? Where it's like the shamey kind of, in an ideal world, this is how we would all be, right? This is what you should do, you like little sort of people. No. There's no shamey here. Rather, I am describing a state of affairs as they are. I'm describing a state of affairs that is so, whether you would like it or not, right? This is the observation that I've had across tens of thousands of people I've worked with. And I'm just describing the physics. This is what happens. You don't have to do that. You don't have to establish the bliss level so strong that it puts your life at risk. No, I'm not saying that at all. There is no should. I'm just describing the physics from the lens of the sacred, because that is where we are navigationally. We are in sacred space right now. Said another way, when you finally realize and find and start following the golden thread of your bliss, you can take this as an exhortation, and as a warning. You always somehow end up having what you want and what you need along the way. Not necessarily so much as to completely numb and stuff down your wound, but just enough to enable you to continue the pursuit and prosecution of your bliss level and golden thread. If you are able to stay in the sacred space long enough to allow the vision of desire, the vision of your bliss and golden thread, the perception of your Zuran to come through and establish themselves as a clear and unmistakable pattern, or template, right? The word template itself, temple, comes from the word temple and Temenos, to cut. Template is a cutting pattern. Then this template, is the thing that will reorder your own realm of the profane around it to support the temple. But this template will also turn around, the sacred will also turn around and nourish the profane as well. I mean, you have all had this experience in the past 8 weeks, right? A couple of months. I've gotten emails from so many of you. You know, you get nourishment and perspective here in the sacred space that we have created together explicitly, with vision and ego, and with ego, power, and money, right? Cut off, like St. Patty's Cathedral, we've cut this space off, and it's taken resources to do that. It's taking a lot of money to like find you and sort of gather you and you know, have you self-select into getting involved with something like this. Cut off from the profane life of the world around us for just a couple of hours at a time. And then we take our nourishment together, our spiritual and emotional meal together. And then when you go out into the profane, the insight and feeling you get in the sacred informs your path in the profane. How you feel, how you act, how you think back in the profane, all are impacted by your time here in the sacred, in this gathering group, but also from your time in the sacred on your own as an individual. The sacred always directs the profane, not the other way around. And so with regard to desire, when you hold space for money in the sacred, the golden thread of money does have its own directionality. Your experience in relationship with money at the desire level will also have its own directionality, which may or may not be congruent with the directionality of what you want in the profane, to shield and have prestige and continue keeping up appearances, right? Now, if you don't know your bliss, you have no idea what your golden thread is or how it moves forward in the world, this desire level of directionality from money will make no sense, because you don't see the pattern it's following. It's going off in this other direction, and I'm not getting paid for all this profane work I'm doing. What's the problem? And money's like, you know, read your manual. Look at your map. It's like your buddy on the soccer field. It's like, I'm following the play we agreed on, right? You're not following. So I'm going to keep lofting the ball, and I'm just waiting for you to be there one day, right? Because money knows, like the life forces are intelligent. They know they are flowing with your Zuran. They're flowing with the natural flow of your golden thread, or trying to, even if you don't realize it yet. But then if you don't see money as even valid, if you see money only as a profane necessary evil, only from the perspective of a need and want, then you're not going to see the pattern. But you may see it as malicious, as this like punishment of the gods or whatever, right? But even that won't make sense. You'll be like, I just did the same thing I did in my last job, and it's not working this time. Why are the gods so irrational? And the answer is they're not. I mean, sometimes they are, but they're not always. Sometimes they're following a pattern that you just don't see yet. It's a paradox. It's not malice. But then as you get to understand your bliss more and more, the directionality of money at this desire level, at the sacred level, will start to make more sense. At the profane level, it will seem malicious. But when you see it at the sacred level, right, it will be shown more as a paradox. You will realize, oh my gosh, you know, way back when I was complaining about that job, I realized I was never being punished. It was never malicious. It was simply directionally, I was going against the flow of my bliss. Money was going in the flow of my bliss the whole time. I just haven't seen it yet. And nobody's blaming me for that. This is part of the work of art that is our life, right? And discovering this. You just didn't have the lens of your bliss. You didn't understand it. So after all, it was a paradox, not malicious. And for the part of the pattern you do see, you clip in and you go, and things flow great for a while, until you hit the next pattern that you don't quite comprehend yet, right? And that's okay. That's how it works. That's why we go healing, bliss back and forth forever. And the way this feels when it happens is that once you have a clear vision of your bliss, money loses its charge of fear, threat, and control. To said another way, money becomes just money again. Like you can relax, money relaxes. Oh, thank God, I can like get back to just doing my job, right? I mean, I'm just, the right wing forward, right? I'm just the right wing forward. I'm not like the savior of the entire team single-handedly. Please don't put that on me. Money's like, please don't do that to me, right? I just want to do my job and then go home and like have a beer, right? So it's no longer tangled up in the need and want level of your wound. What you have to prove to other people, what you have to do in order to get soothing and emotional validation and prestige from the world. And money is like the holy grail of doing that. Money is just money again. So when you're cooking your bliss, right, and you know what you're cooking, you know what you're doing. Money is just like salt. If you need more salt, you just add more salt. If you're like, oh, I'm running out of salt, I go out and I get myself more salt. It's just the thing in the service of your higher pattern and intention of what you're cooking. And there's no shame in money anymore, right? Just like there's no shame in salt when cooking. It's like, oh, there's a salt line. I need to fight. I need to like do profane deals in back alleys to get my salt. What's our schedule? Do we need to cook this right away? We do. Okay, fine. I'll pay you $500 for a shaker of salt. Done. And then we go and we get it done. We just done. Just like with an acorn, right? It somehow magically pulls in water, dirt, sun, wind, all of the elements, which then get reorganized through the golden thread of the acorn into the larger Ziran flow of its transformation into the next form, which is the towering oak tree. And this flow is pretty much irresistible, right? In each one of us, it's basically oak tree or bust, right? Oak tree or like, fuck it, why are we even here? Okay. And this is the golden thread. This is bliss seen from the perspective of an acorn. There's an acorn within you too. You are an acorn, right? And if money were required for that, in addition to sun, dirt, water, then money would be pulled into the flow, just like any other life force: intelligence, sexuality, charm, luck. So when you do have a money block or a money challenge, one way to see it, just like the pandemic itself, this is, I think, answering your question. When you do have a money block or a money challenge, one way to see it is as punishment or malicious. You dumb bunny, you're like not doing the right thing, and let me like smack you, right? But the other way, just like we said in session number 1, the other way is to see it as a transformation or as a cipher or a message. In other words, when you have lost your job in the pandemic, it's not malicious. It's not like, oh, you're an idiot. You're going in the wrong direction. You're not going on your bliss. So I'm going to hit you with this rod until you do the right thing. It's not malicious. It's paradoxical, right? There is a following, a flow, and a pattern that we don't quite understand yet, the larger pattern yet, right? And it is a paradox. You don't get that it's an oak tree, but when you do, you realize, oh God, that's why I was so frustrated at the last 3 jobs. Okay, now I think it's in this direction. I'm not sure, but let's try. And then you'll try, and it still won't be quite right, but you'll be talking to money, the muse, whatever, and she'll be like, yeah, a little to the left. Okay, a little to the left. And it's like, oh, perfect. And then you start flowing. Right. So it's not a punishment. It's just, when you see that, so in any given person's case, right, it's a case-by-case thing that we do, but, it's not just, oh, I'm a bad person. It's more like, yeah, something's off. We don't know if it's like very off or if it's a little bit off. Like if you change one little thing, things start flowing again, but it's, or it's like you keep changing and you're like, actually, I don't think small adjustments. I think we need to change direction. It's case-by-case. You never know. And you never know because you don't see the larger pattern. And if you don't, I don't see it. Nobody else. I mean, people you love who know you, they may see the pattern and they may be afraid of telling you because you don't want to hear it, right? But there's all these cases, right? But when you realize this is what's going on, regardless of how severe the case is, your entire attitude changes. Right, where you realize, oh, it's a puzzle we're solving. It's not a judge, jury, and executioner. So you're not railing against the unfair punishment of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? you become curious. You have wonder, you have enthusiasm. You almost have nerdy enthusiasm to figure out, so what is going on then? Like if I look at all of my careers and jobs in the past like 20, 30 years, and we do this in the Bliss exercise, and we will do it in the money program eventually. Like, what the hell, right? What is the discernible pattern from everything I've ever done? What is the nature of the paradox? What exactly are we missing? Right? It is metaphorically an acorn, that's okay, but what exactly is my acorn? Is it an acorn? Is it a palm tree? Is it even a tree? What is it? And you get excited about it because you get to the real question. I mean, you crack this question, you cracked everything. Everything. Even if you're like, you know, in the third age of life in your 70s and 80s, it's worth cracking. You get really excited because you're like, oh, there's not enough time left for me. No. Even if you crack it right before the buzzer goes off, right, you've still surpassed in performance, expectation, achievement, more than what like 99% of all humans who have ever walked the earth have achieved, right? You figured out the pattern, you figured out the golden thread, and if not in this acorn, then the next acorn, that's fine. And so when you have a money block, right, this is one possible way to think about it if you want, and to describe it in the way words we've used, when you see it in this way, all fear, threat, and control fall away. Right? Oh, okay, I still need to pay rent for next month. Okay, so we'll enjoy this feeling for 5 more minutes. All right, put that away, back in the profane, shield up, sort out, and go and you get your rent done. Right, you get it done. Right, you do what you have to do. But then when you come back to like, okay, I have like a day where I can just like do nothing. You're back in the war room, like looking at the maps, going like, what are we missing? What are we missing? And you know there's something there. You can feel it. You can taste it almost, right? And so then after the initial pandemic and you get into this like zone of like looking at life like that, going forward, what it will feel like is that even as you're like driving around, this happens to me now, even like revenue disruptions in my business, right? You get a revenue disruption. You know, you get a tax bill that you didn't expect. You get like this overdue thing that you're like, well, I thought I paid it, right? And you do get annoyed, but very quickly thereafter, you're like, wait a minute, this is a money block. This is money like ringing my bell, you know, like ringing my bell a little bit, right? So I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting a text from money. Or you're like, the whole house shakes. So like, whoa, did you feel that? I think money just like, you know, I think something just hit the ship. Right? But you're excited because you know everything in the ocean is your friend. Every life force in the ocean is your friend. Right? Everything in the forest is like rooting for the acorn. Right? That's why a forest exists. Right? To bring up the next wave of acorns. And you go and you investigate and you learn something new. And by the way, not to get too broad here, right? This approach, this sacred profane approach, this is everything I do in my life. This is my basically life practice. This is my work. So this basic approach can be applied to anything, any life force, chronic illness, disease, anything that comes to you, even a global pandemic. You can always step back if you want, only if you want. No fear, threat, and control. There is no should. But if you want, you can always say, what is the message here? What is the cipher? Right? What is going on here? Right? Those of you who have done mythic healing, this is the central question of the Fisher King, of the Holy Grail myth that we study together. Parzival, right? What is the healing question? Right? The healing question is, what ails the king? What is going on here? What is the matter here? And just by asking the question, you don't even have to answer it. Just by asking it, the king rises up, healed, and then the kingdom flourishes again. Right? Just the curiosity, the wonder about what is the deeper pattern here in which all of this shit happening to me actually makes sense and has meaning. Just asking the question, the spark of curiosity itself, the ancients would say, in the Fisher King, the Celtic kind of Middle Christian kind of fairy tale, right? So the mythic image of the Grail, the thing that heals all wounds. The way to attain it is to ask the healing question. And the healing question is, what is the matter here? In our language, what is the deeper pattern in which all of this actually makes sense? So there's so much more to say on this topic. I should move on to the other stuff. But if I were treating this as like a full healing topical program, we would also get into patterns of money wounds, like specific wound patterns for men, specific wound patterns for women. Gross generalizations, but so that you can get the flavor for like how it differs. By profile, we would talk about the mythic pattern or archetype of money itself, where it came from, how it changes over time. And in the money program, and I just say this because I want to earmark it for myself, I would probably end up talking about how our relationship to money in modern Western society and culture has been impacted by our heritage of Protestantism. Not as a blamey thing. I mean, I was raised Catholic, when all American Catholics are basically Protestants. But in particular, Calvinist doctrine, and how that has led us to this idea of money as a part of not just how we live and feed ourselves, but actually as a part of how we tell, even within our own selves, whether we are loved by God or not. Right? It's kind of a long story, which is why in the US and Northern Europe, and in societies influenced by that same ethic, the Protestant Puritan work ethic, we tend to work until we die. We do not take siesta, right? Because it's not about having enough money. It's about money as a way for us, as a sign, as a cipher in this Protestant pattern, for us to tell even to ourselves whether we are actually members of the elect or members of the damned, in the strict sense of Calvinist doctrine, which was the doctrine taken up by the wealthy merchants of the Northern European traditions, the burgher cities, Hamburg, Freiburg, Geneva, in the 1500s, Salzburg, Salt City, right, in the 1500s, and still impacts how we work, regardless of whether we're religious or not. We can be atheist and we will still be influenced by this ethic. So anyway, that's it. So those are some thoughts on money. It's a huge topic beyond the scope of just one session, deeply entwined in the path of healing and in the path, of course, of bliss, the dual turbine that we talk about in circumambulation, Presidian circumambulation, and the golden thread. But here, I hope in sacred space, I have been able to just jiggle your perception of the nature of money just a little bit, just to get it a little bit loose in the socket with my opening arguments and follow on, for you to be able to start to see it, to feel it, right, as its own valid life force in you, not just as a thing to be abused and exploited and then discarded as a necessary evil for some other end, right? And so I hope that what I've just explained will be of some support and practical utility and insight for you as we go through our collective transformation in the pandemic crisis, a part of which may end up being a transformation in our relationship with money overall, both individually and as a collective society. Okay. All right. So that's money. So what I want to do now is let's do a little bit of Q&A. Let me get down to the questions here. And I'll just do this from the screen here. And I'll just go through. Where did you go? I lost your question. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to hit your question here so you can see it in the replay and skip to it. So if I'm with a person and I take away their name and I experience them without a name, does the person disappear? Does the division between me and them disappear? So my quick answer, because I make my notes as I'm reading, I don't read the whole thing. My first answer was yes, this can happen in a lovely way, in a good way. And then she goes on to say, I'm really interested in this answer because I dated a guy who studied Zen, and there were many times as I was waxing on in the profane that I felt him looking at me in that space that has no names, which caused him to have no opinions about anything. And it came off as so weird and unsettling that I stopped going out with him. Now that I may know what he was doing, I wonder if I should have just called him on it and tried to join him. And if that succeeded, we would have just sat there looking at each other with nothing to say in the middle of a restaurant. Right? I felt like I, the one with the name, had essentially disappeared in his worldview, which in the moment felt dismissive. So I'm not sure how to do this and have it be felt as loving. So there are hours of comments I can make on this, but I will spare you. I will spare you. The quick answer is I'll just give you my wild ass intuition. I think he was just being an ass. I mean, if he really had let it melt, he would have flowed with however you were going. Like when you relax and your partner's in the profane, you end up flowing into the profane with her, right? It's natural. And there is this phenomenon. I'm a man, so I can just say, like, with men in particular, where we like to find things that are very intellectualized. And Zen is like a classical sort of breeding ground that attracts a certain kind of boyish man, right? No, I'm not saying all Zen men. I'm just saying there's a kind of Western man that really likes this. When Zen is intellectualized as something you should do, right, it loses most of its power, obviously, because it profanes Zen. It's like the profane practice of Zen, which is pointless. Which is why so many, why you will, let's say this, you will sometimes encounter, not as a general pattern, sometimes, Western Zen people who are kind of assholes, right? Where they're in this Zen mode, but they're doing it with this kind of Protestant should, fear, threat, and control thing, right? You need to be mindful or else. You need to be meta or else. You need to be grateful or else. Or, oh, ha, 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 he's not so grateful. Is he? Oh, he lost his temper in the restaurant, didn't he? Oh, ha, ha, ha. Silly Zen neophyte, right? And this is like, and for me, just to validate this, right? This aspect of getting lost in the profane aspect of Zen or anything, right, is part of the journey. It's a valid part of the labyrinth of circumambulation. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not shaming anyone for doing it. But you will encounter many people on the journey who are in the part of their journey where they're just being like over-intellectualizing assholes, right? And that's from his wound. It's not his fault, and you can have empathy for it. But also, like, you have your own like dignity, and you don't have to date it or put up with it. So yeah, I don't know if that this is the question you're asking, but I'll just say it. It's like, so it was him, not you. Nothing wrong with you. Nothing technically wrong with him either. But if you really want to float off into the clouds and be enlightened, like, why are you with your girlfriend in a restaurant eating and have one foot in the temple? It's like, enjoy your dinner, enjoy your girlfriend, right? Like, nurture her, like, emotionally support her. And if you're like, no, I want to pursue enlightenment, then like put on your big boy pants and like sign up for the monastery full time. Why do you have to do both? Or if you're going to do both well. Okay. Okay. Yeah, she clarified that there were two people asking that question. One asked the first question and the second. But hopefully I answered your question anyway. Okay, so let's do this one. I may not get to all the questions. I'll answer for a while, and then I want to switch over to the other stuff, and I'll push all the questions for the next session. So I read a quote today that triggered some thoughts and questions. The quote is, "Kindness is always the reaction and answer, especially when it's not obvious and in the face of anger and negativity." My thoughts: I've always believed this to be true, and I've never really questioned this way of living and responding, no matter how painful and difficult the situation. Being loving and kind is something I've always aspired to, but in doing this, appears I may have stuffed down the less desirable parts of myself. My question is this: how do we live in this way while still honoring the parts of ourselves that do feel hurt, wronged, angry, and all these undesirable emotions? I don't consider them undesirable. How to respond from a place of love and kindness without stuffing down all the ugly, undesirable emotions. So I'll just give you my sort of straight answer. So for me, it's okay to be angry. right? And I mean, in 7-day healing, when we do that program, I mean, you're in it, so I'll just tell you, like, you ask anger, you talk to anger. It is a valid board member. Anger, money, they're both valid board members. You do the day 3 exercise, and then you just get into it. You'll get sort of insight and instruction, and then you proceed from there. So that's the tactical answer. At a higher level, for me, it's like, you know, if you need to let something out and like incinerate all the people around you, metaphorically speaking, then fine, maybe that's what needs to be done. But you can have a board meeting and get the full download of what's going on, and then make a plan for the outer world. I, for myself, do not feel that kindness is always the answer, right? There's no rule for me. Even kindness is always the answer still implies threat and control. It's still a rule because you use a lot of force to enforce it within yourself, where you even call parts of how you feel ugly and undesirable. You're angry. That may be ugly and undesirable to someone else, but it's like, if you're feeling it, it's there, right? So you may call my nose ugly too, but it's like, that's not going to win you any favors from me either, right? Even worse if I call it myself, right? So anyway, the mechanism for me instead, again, and this is not a rule, this is like only if you want, right, is to do your inner healing, recover the lost board member, et cetera, et cetera. And then for most instances, when you are then still kind to the outside world, you're going to be kind because you're kind within your own world, right? Because outer reflects the inner. In other words, you won't need to try to be kind, you'll just be kind. And when someone messes with you and crosses your boundary, you'll push them back gently. And if they continue, you'll like turn up, you know, the voltage until they desist, right? And then you'll be in sacred and you'll be like, okay, this asshole showed up in my outer world. What's going on with that? And we do all the 7-day healing stuff where we look for that. Because again, the outer reflects the inner, right? The asshole in the outer world reflects something in me. So you take that as not just as a punishment, not just as an irritation, but also as a cipher and a message. And you go in and you look for the guy and you get the cipher and the message, right? Yeah, so as an example, like when I am kind to you in Q&A, right? When you email me and you're like, oh, you're so kind, you're so patient. So it's not a mask, right? It's not a mask. I'm being kind because I want to be kind, but also like I'm not a saint, right? I'm kind to you only because I tend to be kind to myself, right? I tend to be kind to myself. So when you as a reflection of myself in the outer world comes up, I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going, right? I expect like you to treat me with respect and back and forth. And it's like, I just expect it. And the whole outer world tends to rearrange around it. And if there are exceptions, then it's like, it's something, I mean, I get very nerdy curious when, it's very rare that it happens, right? But like someone comes up and they're upset or like angry or whatever. I tend to get very nerdy curious when that happens 2 or 3 times in a row. I'm like, oh, there's something going on. Oh, good. I get like, let's go on like, you know, a scavenger hunt and find it, right? So when you ask a question, you know, nicely, and I'm like, ooh, good question, right? Your bully, someone's bully may be saying, oh, you know, he doesn't really think it's a good question. He thinks you're stupid. He's just pretending to be kind. And it's like, that's not the case at all, right? So for me, like inner reconciliation is the key for me. Once you have inner reconciliation through whatever process you follow, then it creates the world around you through reflection. And we talk about all that in the physics of that in day 7, right? The program, outer reflects the inner. Okay, so that's my, and thank you for asking that question. Okay. Okay, we're running short on time. Let me do these a little bit out of order. I do want to get to, let me just answer this one quickly. Oh, actually, I think you reposted it, so let me. Okay, so hey, Artie, I've been a seeker for years, working with some wonderful teachers, others less so. I feel like the second/first bird. I found it hard to maintain a practice of any sort. I recently learned basic Qigong. I have a 10-minute routine. I feel great when I do it, but I resist doing it, and then I wag the finger at myself, right? So sacred and profane. Another example, I listened to but never did the exercises for 7-day healing. Although that's changing, you just emailed me. So what's that about? Resisting things that support me and I enjoy. So for me, this is just like the rule to always be kind, right? This resistance is very normal. And my answer is not to, fight through your limiting beliefs and like overcome your resistance and get off the couch, you lazy bum, and start, improving yourself. My answer is that's totally normal. I do that too. And my general, in an acute, like when you need to go out and like make money for like to pay rent, then, other forces take over, and cattle prod, you're like a blind animal. You just get stuff done, right? You like wake up from a blur and like the money for rent is all suddenly there and you don't even know how it got there. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're in the zone where you're like in the sacred, you're allowing things to flow and you have enough protected sacred space around you in time, space, finances, everything. To sort of raise the flag of finding the direction of the wind, right? You have time to like take time out, go into your captain's quarters and actually look at the map, right? There's not missiles flying over your boat, which for most of us in modern society is a lot of the time. We have a lot of time, okay? It's just in the question of how we use it. But for me, when you're in that mode, I'm like, just do whatever you want to do, right? You just do whatever you want to do. Ideally, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt other people. But if you're resisting 7-day healing, right, it's just like the asshole in the outer world. There is a reason, which is well-meaning. Not that the outer guy has but the reflection of the inner part of you. The inner part of you is well-meaning. So when you're resisting, it's not that you're a lazy bum. It's not malice, it's paradox, right? So when you look at the lens of through paradox, it's like, well, why am I resisting? Right? And you can ask the question. And when you ask it, it's not with the baseball bat hidden behind your back of saying, aha, that's why. So now get back in your cage and like, let's do this healing program that everyone says is great and we should do it and it's good for us. No. You say, why are you resisting? And they'll be like, I'm tired of doing all this stuff that makes you feel like you're not good enough. Like, why do I have to take a self-improvement program? Why can't you just love me as I am? Right? And if you hear that, it's like, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. This is your conversation with yourself, where it's like, well, shit, I'm not going to do any program then. Why don't I just try loving you as you are? You're just talking to yourself, right? And so you're like, what is that about, right? Resisting things that support me and I enjoy. That's one example of what it could be. And I just use that example, not to say that that's what it is, but I'm saying that's an example where it's like, when you consider that example, it's like, oh, so the resistance could be reasonable. There could be a pattern that I don't see that this teammate is running, that in order to find out the pattern, I just go talk to her and she'll tell me. Right. So that's why it's like, and when you don't feel like being kind, it's like you can just talk to the anger and figure out like why you're not being kind. And it'll tell you, and it will reveal a portion of the map of the larger pattern. And then you'll learn something. And then with that more complete map of what's going on within you, then you make your decision, do I do the program or not, or not do anything for a while, right? And that's okay. That's okay. That's why I always say that's okay, because I don't want you doing stuff brute force because I or any other expert said so, right? The only thing I have, and even this thing is a suggestion, is if you feel like, go in and investigate, so the impulse or the anti-impulse or whatever, and then just see what you find. And then, get more. It's like in business. If you can afford it, take a pause, get more data, and then hopefully make a better decision. Okay. This one, I think a couple of people wanted to. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this one. Oh, shoot. Go back. Okay. So, hey, Artie, can you talk a little bit about the intersection of the sacred and the profane when it comes to making money and also following your bliss? So I basically talked a lot about this. In other words, when following your bliss seems to reside mostly in the sacred, and making money seems important for various reasons here, meaning need and want, but it also requires a sort of twisting of the feelings that you're trying to follow toward your bliss. What then? Basically, how do I finesse the relationship so that they can coexist happily? So my whole talk was basically a big love letter answer to this question. But some other sort of small comments, since we're in the same thematic topic. This is a topic we cover in the Bliss program. It comes up in healing also. The first answer is, as I've said ad nauseum, you consult with money. You consult with money to work out the vision and the path and the logistics of the flow, right? Money is, so just like if you want to be a gymnast, right? Hopefully you do not have a whipping, domineering relationship with your body, right? Many gymnasts will do it like that. But some gymnasts, like I know one of the best rugby players, I'll just say, to protect in Europe, okay? And one of the things he does is he's like this unbelievable, like world MVP, blah, blah, blah. And something I learned about him recently is that he never whips his body. Right? When he trains, like if he wants to like run for half an hour, he'll run. He never holds a watch. When he stops feeling like running, he just stops. And I'm like, how? I mean, from an American, it's like, how do you do it without whipping, without juicing yourself with steroids? And it's like he is very in touch with his body. And he's like this god of an athlete, right? So, so here, similarly, you want to have this harmony and conciliation, this like easy give and take kind of consultative, conferring relationship with money. Because money is a proxy of ego power. Okay, so what that means is, so a corollary to that is, if you are uncomfortable, discomfortable with money, it may imply that you are also uncomfortable with the wielding and expression of your own ego power. So pattern-wise, this isn't universal, but pattern-wise, you often see people who have discomfort with money also have discomfort with boundaries, right? Also have discomfort with speaking up for themselves. And they may say, oh, you know, well, because of that, you have trouble making money because that's what it takes to make money. In the profane world, it's like, not exactly, right? The way I see that, and I've seen that in my work, is that maintaining boundaries, right? Making sure real estate developers don't take over half of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. Maintaining boundaries takes ego power. Sometimes very forceful ego power, right? Speaking up, right? Maintaining boundaries with your voice, like aggressing into the boundaries of other institutions to basically make changes that you want to see in the world takes ego power. And allowing money to flow in and then forcefully flowing it out to like make the things you want to happen also takes ego power. It's the same intrinsic ego power within you, and discomfort with that ego power will reflect in discomfort with in those three examples, but many more as well. So it ultimately becomes a healing question as well, right? Knowing your bliss is typically not enough, because you'll know your bliss is always changing and evolving. My bliss is always changing and evolving. Every morning I wake up, you know, sometimes as kind of a half joke, I'll ask my muse, like, am I still doing healing today? Right? Because if she tells me to make a hard left turn and start being a sculptor or something, I mean, it's highly doubtful, right? Because I'm like in the flow, I'm like feeling the water all around me. Then I'll walk away from all this and I'll go like be a sculptor. I will be a very good sculptor. But I follow the muse, right? I'm following the golden thread, because I know there are parts of the pattern that I have no clue what the pattern is. So I'm just kind of following, as Hemingway would say, I follow the muse like a blind pig, right? When I work, I'm like a blind pig. So for you, just knowing one part of your bliss is fantastic, but then you need the ego power to put your way to that breadcrumb. And then once you stand over the breadcrumb and you pick it up, from that vantage point, you will be able to see the next breadcrumb. And that takes ego power. That takes ego power, right? The first 3 or 4 breadcrumbs of your bliss may produce no money intrinsically, but that's doubtful. That's doubtful. I've rarely seen patterns of bliss where it's like there's no potential for money or no potential for doing it on the side and then still making money in the profane way you've been doing, which is fine. Right? When you make money in the profane and then feed it into the temple of bliss and you're funding your bliss, the act of being an accountant or a stockbroker or whatever itself becomes sacralized. And we taught in the Bliss program, I don't know if you're doing the Bliss program, this is a part of my answer to something else. In week 11, when we talk about the cathedral at Chartres as an image and the lotus flower, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. You make money, you get salt however you need to get it. If you're stealing salt, I mean, don't steal, don't break any laws. But if you're like overpaying for salt somewhere just to bring it into the temple in order to salt the goat for that part of the ceremony when you burn it on the altar, then your act of going out and overpaying for salt becomes partly sacred in that sense as well. Your entire life becomes sacralized. Okay. Okay, I don't need to say all of them. Okay, let's keep going. How are we doing on time? Okay, so what I want to do here is let's do one more question, and then we'll move on to the story and the exercise. Okay, this one. More on the distinction between sacred desire, need, and want. Hey, Artie, thanks again for creating this space, providing these keys to unlocking rooms within rooms for no reason whatsoever. Thank you. Let me skim down here. Right. So, so this leads to my question. So many times, the essence of Buddhist thought, the key to awakening / enlightenment for all of us, unschooled in its true depths, gets boiled down to this tired old adage: desire is the root of all suffering. Stop desiring, all you profane people, and you will stop suffering. But your use of the word seems to be different. Desire. You've distinguished between need, want. Your use of the word desire appears to have no object but desire itself. There seems to be no suffering, no want or need. So how come this desire actually is devoid of suffering? I think that's the question. Can you talk more about this? In all the times I've been drawn to Buddhist practices, I've been equally, well, repulsed is too strong a word, perhaps bored is better. Your word to describe teaching enlightenment. Detachment comes across as completely devoid of emotion, dry, skeletal, scraggly. Perhaps because some schools seem to encourage throwing out all of the happy, giggling Buddha baby of desire with the bathwater of need and want, collapsing it all into the root of our collective and profane suffering. Okay, so thank you for this question. So what I wanted to say here, did I want to say that? Okay, this is where I said that. Okay, so first of all, thank you for this question. Let me just check my Facebook Live to see if it's okay. Hey, Facebook people. So for me, it's hard to talk in terms of Buddhism or any other system. People are like, is this anima and shadow? Is this id and superego? It's hard for me to talk in terms of any other system because any other system is just loaded with a lot of stuff, right? Like Protestantism, right, is loaded with a lot of stuff. It's a lot of should, and it is profane. The practice of Christianity, when it is with threat, which is a lot of Christianity, becomes profane because it's not a sacred sanctuary, right? So in Buddhism, I think I mentioned this earlier. When you practice Buddhism and everything is you should do this and it profanes the practice, and that will often be the characteristic of the outer rings of any religion or practice or whatever. It's only when you get into the inner circles, when you've proven yourself, when you've gotten through a bunch of kind of trials, that they're like, okay, well, we know you can handle the weight and we know you can handle the stuff, so let's come on in here and we'll explain some of this other stuff. And it's not the fault of any tradition. I mean, Zen Buddhism in particular, the grand temples of Japan, And if you want me to talk about this, you can post a question. It's not even something. It's just none of my business what happens in Zen Buddhism. But if you've ever wondered why the shoguns of the medieval period gave all their best lands and property to the Zen monks, one version of how it turned out was that the monks went in a very crafty, the Hindus would say, with a very powerful and dramatic, breathtaking upaya, skillful means, and told the warlords, I want to take all of your best lands and build a temple. And the warlords would laugh with all their cronies around and say, and why will we do that? It's because I'm a Zen Buddhist. I learned my craft from China. And I will have you know that if your soldiers study with me, I will bring them to this state called enlightenment. And this state of enlightenment is beneficial for you as the warlord because they will lose their fear of death, which will then allow them to fight on the battlefield for you with even more courage and effectiveness. And there is a pivotal story of how this happened. And the warlord tested him. The monk offered a test. And the test was to put this white hot sort of iron on his head, on his bald head. And he said, okay. He actually suggested it himself. And the warlord was like, shit, all right. I mean, I want you to sign this waiver. I don't want you to sue me afterwards. They put the iron on his head. It started sizzling and cooking his scalp. And the monk sat there unperturbed. And finally, the warlord was like, okay, that's enough. That's enough. He's like smelling roasted monk, right? And then he started giving him, and then all the other monks followed and saying, me too, I have the superpower too. So in this case, it was a weaponization of Zen. And you can argue till the cows come home whether that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. But the monks, in the service of what they believed was the expansion of the temple of the sacred, that's how they did it. That's how it's not for you or me to say it's right or wrong, right? And so these temples became like family businesses. And all of these families would have a first son that would go off into the army, a second son that would be a merchant and make all the money, and the third son they would send and be the priest. So these places were filled with like 9 and 10-year-old boys. It was like a boarding house. So the Japanese tradition of Zen, there's a lot of hitting, there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of control over your body, because that's how they did it to manage crowd control, right? And then we bring it over here, all the practices, and we dress like them and we act like them, and it works for some people. But for a lot of us, it's like, we're not monks. We're definitely not those kinds of monks. And so other traditions, they come, they take root, they become fashionable, and then we impose the Protestant profane lens on it, where we say, well, this is how we do it, so this is how we should do it. We should do it, right? I mean, you're a Western woman, you do yoga, you do this, you're perfectly in control of your body, and yet you like put yourself through these ascetic practices, and they don't quite feel right, and you wonder why. I mean, some women do it, and it feels like, coming home, it's the greatest thing. My point is that it is, the ideal here is that, why am I sharing this? At a high level, long story short, there's similar stories of Catholicism, Christianity, there's similar stories of yoga. At the end of the day, this is why my advice to people is do what you want to do, right? I'll teach you the principles of sacred and profane, but then you go out and you be a choosy shopper, and you do the thing that makes you feel good. And let me tell you what being in bliss feels like. And you're like, oh yeah, I like that. And it's like, well, you go, come up with, the buffet is open to everyone. You go concoct your own sort of mixed plate of the buffet that tunes it just to the way where you feel fully the way I've described it, if what I've described is attractive to you. And you go figure it out. And if something doesn't feel like that, you put something in your mouth that's like, this tastes like shit, then don't eat it, right? I mean, that's why I'm always like, you have all the sovereignty. You always retain all the sovereignty. People are always like, oh, you're the guru, Artie, tell me what to do. And it's like, dude, I don't know. I have no idea. Right? In the vocabulary of 7-day healing, I am not a board member. I don't have a vote on your board. Right? I'm just the consultant you brought in and paid, right, from the profane, from Facebook, to help you, sort of build a high performance team out of your board. And then what the team decides, I don't know. They'll decide what they decide. So, so for me, the ideal is from the sacred. You don't get rules, you get values, right? Rules, if you break them to the letter, you're punished, they're enforced, fear, threat, and control. Values, when you violate a value, it doesn't lead to punishment, it leads to a conversation, right? The value is, I would like to be in a place in my life where I'm kind to most of the people I meet. And when I feel like I want to be unkind, I don't get punishment. It leads to a conversation. In this case, an inner conversation, right? That's the difference between a value and a rule. So in the sacred, it's values that are presented to you, and you pick them up and put them down as you please. Paradox versus malice, sacred versus profane, wonder versus asking. I have like a wall of like 70 of these things that I'll put out someday. But in the sacred, you get these values and they become guideposts, right? It's like posting the hours of the temple, and then you decide based on that how you want to use the temple. So desire is the root of suffering is more of an opening gambit. The origins of Buddhism, regardless of Zen or not, are that it is not a scripture, a revealed truth, revealed like the Quran or the New Testament or anything, right? This book of rules that you have to follow. It is a dialogue, right, with the Buddha. And his opening gambit is desire is the root of suffering. Now, I don't have time to get into all this, but it is a dialogue with a living teacher where you receive values that you use to navigate. It's not a rule to be memorized. And basically, that's how I teach too. I teach values. I don't teach rules. And typically the way, I mean, it's like a chess game. It's like, pawn to e4, and then there are different openings, right, where you face each other. The koans, all of these, and when you read a book of koans, you're reading a book of openings and parries and fianchetto and sort of the Sicilian opening, like in chess and over. And it's I mean, you read it and you're just laughing out loud at how they're like sparring with each other. Like the Blue Cliff Record is like a fantastic. It's like reading a graphic novel, right? And so I'll just play this out, right? So desire is the root of all suffering. And it's like, oh, okay, so what do I do? Well, I mean, you could, let's see what the Buddha does. He's meditating, he's sitting around all day. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that till we're like anorexic, and we're like, we can like sleep on a bed of nails, and we, eat 1 grain of rice and do all these things. And then at the end, you're like, it's not quite working. And then the Buddha, and this is where you like trap the queen in chess, right? The Buddha's like, yes, well, there's one additional problem. You've eliminated all desire, which is, I suppose, admirable. Not really relevant to what I teach, but admirable. Admirable. It's quite a superhuman feat. Congratulations. But there is one more desire you haven't yet vanquished. And like, oh, what's that? It's the desire to not desire. Right? And they're like, fuck. How in a Protestant kind of framework of fear, threat, and control do I stop desiring not to desire? I may as well, withdraw my application from the temple and walk away and just be a free spirit in the world and do whatever the fuck I want, which, by the way, is kind of not the whatever the fuck you want, but that's kind of what I teach, right? And what you realize when you read all the scripture from a certain lens is you realize that the reason that's the opening gambit is because Buddha's just playing the ball like in golf. He's just playing the ball where it lies, right? And then guiding them from there to get the ball into the hole. Desire is the root of all suffering, but you could also just as easily say desire is the root of all pleasure, which is also true, right? But no one who is deep in pleasure comes in their hands and knees to the great guru asking for help. It's only the people who are in deep suffering. So he has all these people coming to him from suffering. So he plays the ball where it lies. And he's like, well, the root of your suffering is desire. Right? And the party boy who's like doing drugs and having the time of his life, the Buddha could also say, desire is the root of your pleasure. And the party boy is like, yeah, Buddha, come on, like have a drink. Right? And he's got no problem at all. So my point is, when these things are said, it is in historical time, this handcrafted custom kind of thing. All these stories you read are just examples, they're case studies. But each human now is going to be unique as well. Right? And it's a lot of work. It's really tiresome work, which is why I don't do it. In fact, I mean, yeah. I'm not going to talk about. Let me skip around here. How are we doing on time? Okay. They're all different kinds of monks, but basically, you when then the living tradition is put into scripture and then taught through, multiple generations of middle management, of clergy, they become calcified into these rules, right? Because when you lose contact with the sacred, but you still have the scripture and you're in the profane, the book of scripture becomes a book not of values, but of rules, right? And the quality and the value of desire is the root of all suffering as the opening gambit that will lead you to this checkmate in the end is lost. You just stick with the, pawn to e4, pawn to e4, pawn to e4, and you just hammer on that, and you don't actually play out the rest of the game. Because the quality of the fact that it was a game, this like push and pull between, the one called the student and the one called the master, they're really interchangeable, is lost, right? Which is why you have new religions coming in and reform movements and all the rest of it. So, for your question, for me, emotion is okay. Over intellectualizing is okay. Sticking to hard and fast rules like desire is the root of all suffering and like, being so intellectual that you see through your date at the dinner table and like lose them. All of that, I mean, it's not okay to hurt other people or hurt yourself, but overall, it's like all of that is circumambulatory. And there is a larger pattern. And, the interesting question, not the rule, but the value is if there's some reasonable doubt that there could be a larger pattern here that we're not getting, it would be really interesting to like find out what that pattern is. It's a nerdy interest, not a. It's a wonder. It's a curiosity, not an asking. Asking is like, it is this way, isn't it? Isn't it? Yes or no? No, don't say maybe. Yes or no. Answer the question. Asking is control. Curiosity is like, what is this thing? I have no clue, and you let the thing tell you. Okay, so that's the difference there. And so, yeah, the whole elect damned, we don't have time for that now. But I hope I at least partly answered your question, and thank you for asking the question. All right, so I'm going to stop Q&A there, and I'm still going to run over time because we still have a couple things to do. Hopefully we won't be too over time. And if you can repost your questions to next week's session, which you do have access to, it's just that green button to sign up for next week's session. I have prepared answers, I think, to most of the questions. So if you repost them, I'll know that you are coming and I'll answer your question. So today with the Sacred Space reading story, we're not going to have a poem, we're going to have a story. And the reason I wanted to pick the story was because it relates to the comments I made on money, and kind of gives an interesting kind of perspective around it. Let me see if I can find it on my screen here. Okay. So, and the story I want to tell is the story of Philoctetes from the Greek tradition. And the story of Philoctetes is that he's a Greek king. In his earlier life, he was gifted by Hercules, the bow of Heracles, which is this like incredible, like magnificent, godlike bow, before he died. So he's honored by Hercules. He has this bow, and so when nations go off to war, they always recruit Philoctetes because he has this like far-shooting like super weapon, right? And he's a badass kind of warrior on his own. So he is a part of the Trojan War. So at the beginning of the Trojan War, he's sailing with 1,000 ships to Troy with the rest of the Greeks, and they beach somewhere. All this side drama happens. Achilles kills the king out of turn. He's like warned, but he like can't control his anger. And they try to make amends. They're like pouring libations and giving sacrifices to, I think, Hera or Athena. I don't remember which, may be both. And in the middle of the, Philoctetes is just one of the king's soldiers, right? So in the middle of all this, Philoctetes is just standing around, and he's bit by a snake on his foot. And he's completely wounded. They're like, okay, let's just finish the ceremony, get back on the boat, set sail. And the stench of his wound, unhealed, it doesn't kill him, is so horrifying that all 1,000 ships can smell it. So the next island they land, it's not sure whether they land on Lemnos or whatever island. Agamemnon pulls Odysseus aside and is like, dude, we got to do something about this. We're all going to choke on the way to Troy. So Odysseus ends up stranding him on the island. And he plays some trick that he always does, right? He's the trickster god. So he plays some tricks, strands him on the island, and as they set sail, everyone else is like, well, where's Philoctetes? And Odysseus is like, well, he didn't want to hold us back, so he begged me, he asked me the honor of being left behind. And they're like, oh, okay, so you didn't abandon. No. He asked to be abandoned, and he wishes us well and he cheers us on. And they're like, okay, that doesn't really make sense because he's going to lose all his glory. But okay, if Odysseus says, oh, who are we to? So they go on and they fight the Trojan War. And Philoctetes is on the island alone, using his bow to like shoot. I mean, it's humiliating. He's shooting like little birds for food to keep himself alive during all this time. He's on the island for 7 or 8 years, stranded. And finally, near the end of the Trojan War, probably 8 or 9 years into it, this is the point at which, Achilles is already dead. This is after the period of time described by the Iliad. And a prophecy, and that the Greeks are like, what is it going to take to like take this city, right? The prophecy comes that they're like, okay, if you really want to win this war, you need to get back the bow of Heracles. And unless the Greeks retrieve the bow of Heracles, they cannot win the war. And everyone's like, you have got to be shitting me. Right? So fine. So Odysseus picks up, he's like, I stranded him, I'll go back and get him. And he goes with Neoptolemus, which is Achilles' son, the red-haired kind of terror, right, who shows up after Achilles is dead. And they go to Philoctetes. They show up after all this water under the bridge, right? All this time has passed. And the work that we have that describes this is the play by Sophocles called Philoctetes. Okay. And this is the part I want to focus on. In the language of 7-Day Healing, this is a classic story of the recovery of the lost board member. Philoctetes is literally the part of you that you left for dead, exiled, stripped him of all his glory. Right? He could at least be at home as a king, living out his days, but he's on an island as a nobody with no name. Right, the horror of all Greeks, to lose your name and honor, because nobody else is with you on the island. They don't call you hail like king. And he loses his opportunity to fight and win glory outside the walls of Troy. So this is a fate worse than death. Odysseus has screwed him worse than if he had just killed him. And he's there nursing all his anger. And this is exactly what the lost board member feels like. Now the boys come back and try to make amends. And this I mean, any of you who have done a lost board member interview, you know how this feels. It's like, oh, now you're back, right? Now you're back, bitches, right? And not even for me. It's because you need my bow to get on with whatever you want to do. Well, fuck that, right? Get back on your ship. I'm happy here eating like fried chicken, like bird or whatever it is I hunt here. Get back on your ship, get out of here before I am moved to anger and I start skewering you with my arrows. And they persist because there's no way, there's no other way forward. So the whole play is the story of Odysseus and Neoptolemus, like convince him. And they use all the different arguments, the argument of honor, the argument of your Agamemnon has promised you, gifts and all these tripods and the first position in battle and the first pick of all the spoils that you should have had the last 7 or 8, all these things. They threaten him. Well, maybe we'll kill you. That's 2-on-1, right? They try to steal the bow. I think Odysseus at one point actually steals the bow. And it's like, dude, we got you. We got your bow. And then it's Neoptolemus who says, no. We can't do it like that. Give him back his bow. Give it back. And Odysseus is like, I cannot believe I'm with this idiot. So the whole back and forth, right? Lying, kicking, cheating, stealing, all the arguments of the profane. Right, we talked about Buddha, right? And it's like when Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree, right? The gods of desire, of death, all came at him, all the slings, threw everything they had in him. This is the same thing. Odysseus and Neoptolemus throw every argument the Greeks have in their vocabulary, right? The threat of loss of honor, the threat of shame, the threat of whatever. Nothing moves him. He's like, I can die without a tomb, without honor. My entire family can be killed. That is the depth of my anger at you, right? Now, this is poetic divine retribution, that you need me. You realize, this is just like the lost board member. You realize, right, halfway through your life now, right, that you needed me after all. And now that's what's brought you back hat in hand. And even now, you still come at me with all the things of the profane. Right? Even now, you don't want me for me. You want me for the power I bring. It's still profane. It's still profane. Even now, when you come back to get me, it's still for the wrong reason. Right? That's always his counter argument of the lost board member. Nothing moves him. And at the end, it is often this thing that critics don't like about the play. The spirit of Heracles himself, the one who gave him the bow, comes down from the sky and says, Philoctetes, this is your destiny. This is your, and if I may insert our own vocabulary, this is your Zuran, this is your archetype, this is your mythic form, this is your golden thread. This is the pattern and purpose of your life. You must go with them. And Philoctetes says, fine, I agree. And critics, even to the present day, are like, this is ridiculous. It's like all the Greeks have shown all this stuff. And then, Sophocles must have been hungover or had a late night or whatever. And like a modern TV writer, right? Showrunner. He's like, oh, the deadline's coming. Let's just tie it up with a plot gimmick and send Heracles down from the sky, the Deus ex machina, and fix the thing because the play needs to end. It can't go on for another 6 hours, right? So they complain about the quality of this ending. And there's a paper that I read recently that completely changed my perspective on this too. And basically the thesis of the paper, which is the point, which is why I'm bringing the story to you now, is that the ending of the play is not an accident. It is this deep, profound exposition of the power of mythos versus logos, of the power of the sacred versus the profane. And what I mean is, Odysseus comes with all the arguments of the profane: love, honor, humiliation, threat, shaming, money, need, desire, right? All these things, prestige. And Philoctetes says no. Then Heracles comes with the mythos, right? Even if you don't get any of those things of the logos, this is your pattern, and you will go. And Philoctetes, with no counter-argument, says, I will. Right? So names and words, duty, honor, prestige, versus the wordless and imagistic. Right? This is your mythic pattern. The profane versus the sacred. In other words, the lesson, the sort of symbol of all of the play of Philoctetes as given by Sophocles is this point that only the argument of the mythos compels. It does not matter what these petty assholes did to you, whether you cave to their demands or not cave to their demands, the gifts, the no gifts, all of that is irrelevant. This is your pattern. I am Heracles, and the bow of Heracles must return to Troy and complete the pattern of the mythos of the fall of Troy at the hands of the Greeks. And you, Philoctetes, are the bearer of my bow, and you will not be separated from what I have given you. This is your path forward. This is your golden thread. This is what you will do. And he does it. Said another way, the path of the golden thread is not something that you should do. The path of the golden thread is something that you must do, something that you will do. And this is why we precisely, so many of us, fear to know our bliss. When I'm like, what is your bliss? And, oh, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And you start to sort of edge closer to it. And then you get terrified and you say, you know, maybe I don't have a bliss. I don't think I have a bliss. Does everyone have a bliss? I don't think everyone has a bliss. I don't have a bliss. This is precisely why we fear to ask the question of desire, to know our bliss. Why profane society tells us don't ask those questions about what you like to do, what you want to do. Here, let me tell you what you should do, or else. But if you do it, you'll get all these prizes, right? Be a good girl. Be a good girl. Pay no mind to what your body actually desires. I will tell you the kind of man or person. Well, if I'm in this mode, it's probably I'm telling you man, right? You should desire, or else. These are the boxes he should check. And then you over there, you be a strong boy. Right? We don't. If you're a strong boy, we don't care so much if you're a good boy. We want our boys to be strong. Pay no mind to what you actually desire, right? You should want what I tell you to want. You should want to be competent, to generate income, to not show too much emotion. These are the boxes you need to check, or else. And in fact, if you don't check them, what nice girl is going to want to marry you anyway? I'm training them all to check these boxes. And if you don't check them, you will be exiled as well. Look at Philoctetes. You don't want to be like him, do you? Right? And so we threaten with all our power in the profane. Do not ask the question of desire. Need and want? Sure, fine. And we end up with a society where people have no idea what their bliss is. They have no idea there is even this thing called a bliss, myself included. It took Joseph Campbell to first shake me out of my dream. And the reason we're afraid of it, the reason, the example of Martin Luther King is so terrifying for us is because we look at an example like that. It pulls us into the sacred. And it's terrifying from the view of the profane because we realize as humans, this is how a human should live and should die. I say should because it's even from the lens of the profane, using the word should. This is how a man should live and should die, a human. And from the point of view of the profane, it's terrifying because this takes all the things you need and all the things you want and basically flushes them down the toilet in the service of the golden thread, come what may. Right? Dr. King was basically saying, I will follow this thread of justice, come what may, and let the chips fall as they will. Now, the thing is, it's terrifying for us because we're still on the other side of the veil. We're still like, but I have to pay my mortgage next month, right? But when you actually realize this for yourself, and you see the enormity of the larger pattern, the larger mythos around you, then ironically, the way it is experienced in an individual is that you actually relax. You're like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. Oh, well then, all right then. I guess we better just get on with it. And you just surrender. No more fear, threat, or control. You just surrender anyway. Right? That's the power of the mythos. That's the power of the sacred. Okay. In Philoctetes, I haven't read Philoctetes in a while, but it's like you can imagine him once Heracles comes down. There's no room for Philoctetes to say, "Oh, but I still get the gifts, right?" I mean, it's understood. I mean, Odysseus is not going to mess with this. He's still going to give him everything, but all of that is completely irrelevant. That's not why he does it. That's not why he does it. So then, how does this relate back to money? If you have banished money and have money blocks and are trying to understand the paradox, if you've ever had the feeling of money is just a necessary evil, money is just a tool I use from get to point A to B, and you've never honored money as a brother, as a sister, as a member of your true family within you, then you have abandoned it as its own form of Philoctetes. And these life forces have feelings. They can be pissed at you. I mean, they'll always come back to you. It always works out, right? But they can pout. They can like not talk to you. What you are in the process of then is you are trying to get money to come back to you, even after you have betrayed it, right? For those of you who have done 7-day healing, this can be applied to any lost board member, not just money. But in this case, the metaphor is that Philoctetes is money and you are trying to get it back, okay? And then you use all the arguments like Odysseus of the profane. Oh, but I need you. I mean, I piss on you and I like humiliate you. I call you the root of all evil when I go to Sunday services. Oh, but then in the quiet of the dark of night, I'm begging you. I'm begging you to come back, right? And what do I say? Oh, well, what are my reasons? Come on. You got to help me. I need to feed my children. I need to keep up appearances. I need to look good. What will the neighbors think? Come on, you got to help me out. Don't leave me out to twist. Just one more time. All the while, you know you don't give a shit about money, right? You're just soothing your wounds. There's no higher vision, right? You're Odysseus when you're in that mood. You just want to get that bow. There's no real relationship with money. But the minute money turns its back, you're going to be pissing on it again. So, well, money came through. I'm not going to admit that. But God said money is the root of all evil. So, let's all piss and shit on money again. And yet you still want the nicer car. And even the preacher still asks for tithing and donations. The church roof isn't going to fix itself. You still need money. So even the church is two-faced about it. And if you're Odysseus, you can be forgiven for how you feel. I mean, Odysseus is no villain. Odysseus, patron god of me, is the trickster god, really, right? The god of the hinge. The god of luring you into transformation. Here we are. Odysseus at this point, 8-9 years into the Trojan War, he doesn't give a shit about anything anymore. He just wants to go home. It's been almost 10 years outside the walls of Troy. He's lost friends. He's lost his son Telemachus, his son whom he left as a newborn. It's almost 10 years now. He's almost 10 years old now outside the walls of Troy. Right? He hasn't seen him since he's a newborn. This is ancient Greece. There's no internet. There's no postal service. Penelope, who knows? She's married another king and they were waiting to kill him when he comes home, right? At this point on the island with Philoctetes, he will do whatever dastardly thing he needs to do to get that bow, and Philoctetes is having none of it. You of all people, Odysseus, you the one who stranded me here and robbed me of all my honor, of all my kleos, a fate worse than death. So none of these arguments will ever work. The only thing that will work, the singular argument that will work, is the argument of the mythos from the sacred. What is that? Here it is beyond feeding your children and just keeping a roof over my head. The upshot here is that the only argument that will work when bringing money home, when bringing Philoctetes home, when the betrayal has just gone so far, is the argument from the mythos, the argument from the golden thread. No matter what the counter arguments, you betrayed me, you treated me like shit, you misused me for soothing, and if I come back to you, you're just going to do drugs again. In the end, when we've come to our own inner reconciliation with our bliss, with our golden thread, with the true meaning and purpose of our life, we say, yes, but is this our bliss path or is it not? You must acknowledge that this is our bliss path as the Greek people. And I will tell you, prophecy or not, money or not, bow of Heracles or not, we will achieve this bliss path. But you do have a place in it, and you will come. And money, Philoctetes is like, fine, fucker, right? Don't even talk to me. Don't even talk to me, Odysseus. And you, Neoptolemus, I don't even know why you're here. Right? Let's just I don't want to talk. Just get on the boat and we'll go. And they go back to Troy and they win the war. And Philoctetes does win glory on the battlefield. He is the one who, with the bow of Heracles, kills Paris, the instigator of the kidnapper, the lover, seducer of Helen, and the Achilles. So it is Philoctetes who is the first among the Achaeans in that case, where he avenges Achilles, and avenges their killing of the best of the Achaeans. But all of that happens, but that is not why he went back. He also got all the gifts and the honor and the I'm sorries, but that's not why he went back. It was the mythos, not the logos, that always compels. So when you find your bliss pattern, your golden thread pattern, your life mythos, even the estranged life forces of money come back to support you. The mythos, properly seen, properly expressed from the sacred, always compels. And great speakers, right? Leaders, orators, all know, Cicero, Caesar, even Antonius, right? To win, you speak from the mythos, not the logos. So that's it. So no poem this week, just poor old Philoctetes. But I do wager that you will find that the story may come in handy in the future on your journey, and perhaps when you least expect it. Okay, so the last thing I'll do here before I close is I'll do our suggested sacred space exercise for you to just, try some of the things we've been talking about here in the next week between now and the next session. And the exercise is to think about money in your life, is to think about, even now in the present moment of your life, where money has flowed and is flowing easily in your life right now. And to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that? Right? And where it is flowing well, if it's not reward for something you've done, right? The opposite of fear, threat, and control. The opposite of malice. If it's not reward, then what is it? It's paradox. And you just reflect on it. And then also, similarly, spend a little time thinking about where money is blocked in your life. And then also just say, in the sacred, no fear, threat, or control, just pure wonder. Why is that? If money is blocked in these areas of my life, and it's not punishment, and it's not malicious, then what? If I've lost my job out of nowhere, it's not because of something I did. Everyone got laid off, right? So if it's not punishment and it's not malice, then what? Like, what is the paradox here? What is the larger pattern? I mean, there may not be any larger pattern. I'm open to anything always, right? But there is enough evidence. I mean, for me, I'll just tell you, and you take on faith if you wish. The tens of thousands of people I've worked with, there's always a pattern. So if there's a chance there might be a pattern, you sit there and like, what is it? What is the paradox? And reflect on that. Why is that? Why is money flowing where it's flowing and not flowing where it's not flowing? And so when I say, why is that? Why is money flowing and not flowing? I don't mean at the profane, linear logos level of, well, money is flowing because I worked hard, I'm a good soldier, and I did the deal, and the deal went through, and the money came through. It's like, no. That doesn't follow at all. You can work your ass off, do everything the right way, and the money will still not come through. You'll be cheated by your director who doesn't give you the bonus he promised, right? So it doesn't follow. That may be the narrative that everybody feeds you. Oh, you got to work hard and it'll pay off. We all know there are countless times when you work hard and it doesn't pay off. So that logos reason is not the reason why money is flowing. There is also a higher reason. And the question is, what is the higher reason? Similarly, if you lost money, it's like, oh, I lost money because my boss is a jerk and he fired me. Wrongful termination, I'm going to sue. I lost money because I'm a victim and I was cheated. No. People are cheated all the time, and they still end up somehow escaping scot-free. You're like, oh yeah, the guy picked my pocket, and then when he ran, it fell out of his pocket, and he kept going. So yeah, I was a victim and I was cheated, but the money somehow stayed in my flow. Right? So just because someone cheated you doesn't mean that's why money is blocked. People are cheated all the time, and money still flows. So it's at the logos level. I can argue back and forth all day long. Right? We can do this all night. But the question that's interesting to me is not that argument. It's at the higher level. Is what is the mythos of the pattern of money in my life right now? Right? Not what is the logos, the simple linear logic of what is happening, A equals B equals C, but the mythos, the larger pattern. There's not even a logical statement. It's not even in words. It's an image. It's a pattern. It's feminine, imagistic. It's not masculine, linear. Vision is always imagistic. Right? The bow of Heracles. What is the bow of Heracles here? And then using that reflection, gaining insight into the larger pattern of golden thread in itself, as evidenced by money flows and blocks. And when you do that and you get this whole part of the map revealed of your life pattern, it'll reveal it. It's like, okay, you've unlocked the money level for this level. Good job. So let me light up this part of the maze, of the labyrinth. But when you do that, it ends up partially lighting up things regarding to your body or your career or your relationships. Like any one board member you heal and get more insight around, it always spills over into additional ancillary insight into everything else. Right? So the question ultimately is, what is the larger pattern of your life that these flows and blockages alike are trying to get you to like carve into and follow? Right? Said another way, what is the navigational path of your life where if these blockages and flows were pushes and blocks, like what is the pattern of the pushes? Like where is this pattern trying to get me to go? Right? And you'll be like, well, I mean, I guess I could start this other thing, but that's terrifying, right? I don't know, I'm not an expert. And then that'll be the block of fear. Right? But then you look at the whole pattern and you'll see one is a block in the pattern and one is the pattern itself. Now, those of you who have done the Bliss program, just to lock this in, right? The question also, and to use the vocabulary of the Bliss program, what is your, for your mythic form, which is another way of saying golden thread, pattern, or mythos. When you have had, say, money blocks, then regarding your mythic form, when you had the block, would having more money, would the block clearing right at that point have actually disrupted your mythic form, yes or no? And the answer often is yes. You realize if I had had the money block unblocked, I would have used it to soothe. Not necessarily hard drugs or whatever. I would have gone on the vacation and I wouldn't have pumped out the thing I pumped out on that week. Or I would have said, oh my gosh, I'm making so much money. I can't leave this job now, even though I hate it, even though it's blocking my bliss. Right? Those are actually kindergarten, very elementary versions of the almost cliched versions of why the block happens. They're often much more sort of nuanced, but it takes a little sort of reflection to like dig into the why and wherefore of your own particular. There is no rule, right? It's just there's a method of excavating the ancient city, and then I don't know what your city looks like. You got to excavate it, and we'll see something we've never seen before. That's why I love hearing from my Bliss alumni, because I always learn something when they give me the updates. Said another way, would having had more money at this point in time have broken the golden thread? And if you look at the larger pattern, you will often realize, holy crap, it would have broken the golden thread, because I would have been pulled back into the precincts of need and want. Okay. So we're over time, and I want to be sensitive to time. So let me just jump to some like clues to this exercise. If you, again, no pressure, do it only if you want. It's kind of just a fun, nerdy thing. So give that a try, only if you want, and don't feel like it's something you have to do or else. I mean, some of you are like in the middle of like just executing, getting sort of money flow going for emergency need, want things. And if you're doing those, just continue doing them, right? Don't worry about it. But hopefully what I've explained and the clues I've already given, if you choose to try these things out, will be of some practical utility to you in this time, and even potentially offer you some comfort. I hope that that's my goal anyway. I don't know if I'm achieving it. All right. So that's it for the exercise. And we're about 20 minutes over, so I'll just go ahead and close the session. The next session is Sunday. It's free, open to anyone. Please feel free to invite others, bring them in. You know by now I'm not selling anything. Hopefully it's comfortable for you. If you're benefiting from these sessions, this is a time of global crisis. Please go ahead and share it out and get more people in. Even if they watch the replay, whatever, it's totally cool. And then the green button you have on your panel will allow you to sign up for next Sunday's session right now. And for those of you, I apologize if I ran out of time to get to your questions. Even if you have questions in the chat, if you want to repost them as questions for the next session, I'll know to make sure I answer them there as well. Okay. So I hereby close the session of Shared Sacred Space. Thank you for holding this space with me. Thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with me. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you in the next session. Thank you.